Hi, my name is Ryan with Small Business Chronicles. Small Business Chronicles is quickly becoming your Swiss Army knife for small business, whether it be wondering about your emotional intelligence, how to handle employees, HR, selling the business, buying businesses. If you're in business, this has become one of the shows for you, and it's gaining popularity every day. Now, other things that are gaining popularity is not traditional jobs, not working from home, but actually working from abroad. And so no better person to have on the show to talk about that than Kayla Ihrig, that actually makes a living from writing from nowhere, doing that very thing. I think she's joining us from across the pond overseas, somewhere in Croatia, like an MI6 agent. So let's go ahead and thank you for coming on the show and tell us a little bit about all the crazy things that you're doing in your industry.
Hey, Ryan, thanks for having me. I'm a content creator and an author. So I started my website writingfromnowhere.com in a hostel kitchen in London in 2018, thinking I see other people with online businesses and I want one too. So I started this website and I started building skills, blogging, learning about content marketing by doing it, instead of kind of just learning about the industry through reading, which I had done before. And it turned into a freelance writing career that now supports both me and my husband as we travel. So I'm writing for GoDaddy and HubSpot regularly. And I also do ghostwriting and content marketing for brands behind the scenes. And I also just wrote a book called How to Be a Digital Nomad.
So walk me through a little bit of that decision of, hey, I'm going to leave whatever job or stability that I have and just go do this from wherever I happen to be at the moment.
Yeah, that came at 24. I'm 30 now. So I was working in the corporate world and I kind of rebounded very quickly. A lot of people work in corporate jobs for a while before they realize I want more from life. But for me, I kind of entered the working world in a very traumatic time. In my last year of college, my senior year, 7 people in my life died. And not
Oh,
just
wow.
like heart attacks and cancer, which are just a part of life, but like plane crash, somebody getting hit by a car. My roommate's boyfriend just dropped dead one day. He had a seizure and just hit the ground and was gone, and they never found out what caused it. So I graduated with this feeling that, man, I might like die tomorrow. So I need to be very fulfilled in life, because what's it all for if we're not fulfilled? And it didn't take me very long to realize that a lot of people are not fulfilled. And I asked people, like, didn't you think you were supposed to enjoy life more? Like, wasn't it supposed to be more fun? Or and I call fun the corporate F word. And people kind of all said, well, it ought to be, but it's just not. And that's just life. And I saw people living different lives online through social media. A lot of people talk about the negatives of social media. There are a lot of negatives, but for me, it had a very positive impact. I thought, if they can do it, I can do it too. So that's whenever I went out and found freelancing work on Craigslist. It's not just for buying used mattresses, and found a very undesirable, actually, freelance writing job at first, but it grew. And now I feel like I've made it as a freelancer. I love all the work I do, and I never thought I would find that. So I feel really lucky.
So you were talking about, the good parts about social media is I think that's what drove a lot of us to come out and do things not in the norm, not general practice stuff. Like I was a digital marketer, I was in radio, which is kind of cool, but still yet it's that corporate, it's that beat down, working for somebody else. And I don't know what it is about the last 20 years, but that I don't know if you call it a gig economy or just a fractional economy, to where you can pick a thing and just become really good at it and support other corporate businesses, which is kind of how this works. And like the kicker for you is not only do you do it from not at home and abroad, but we're abroad. Can you go over a list of some of the places that you've been just in the last 12 months?
In the last 12 months, the Netherlands, that was my home base for 5 years. Germany, Italy, Croatia, Montenegro, Serbia, Hungary, US, Mexico. I'm forgetting some countries. Europe is like, you drive for 3 hours and you're in a different country. So
Yeah.
it sounds a little bit more intense than it is. You kind of fall asleep on the train in Germany, and then you wake up in Austria.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
what
not
country
like,
are we in?
yeah. I took a road trip one time from Boston to LA. If any of you ever want to take that road trip, don't. It's you stay in one country, like 9 states, and it takes forever, and nothing's worth seeing that much. So, but yeah, I get what you mean in going in Europe, how it's just quickly going through. So what are, just being curious here, what are some of the strangest conditions you've had to work under? Because as we watch the news, as we see things unfold or whatever, over the past few years of doing this, what are just some of those weird conditions that you might have had to navigate to do your job?
That is such a funny question. The weirdest, I worked next to my best friend as she gave birth. And to be fair, she was in labor for 24 hours and she had an epidural and it was like very relaxed. She was like knitting and watching a movie. So I pulled out my computer. I wasn't like, I was there for moral support. But yeah, she was literally in labor with twins about to give birth. And I'm like, shooting off a few emails on my laptop. And then I stayed in the hospital with her and her twins for 4 days. And then I continued I spent a lot of time with them whenever they came home from the hospital. So that was intense, very strange. And where else? And an abandoned school once. Well, during the pandemic, we all worked in very weird situations, I think. So my husband was a high school English teacher at the time, and he was still going into school because he didn't have like a webcam or anything at home. So he was still going into school, and I was allowed to go with him because schools were empty. So we were literally working in like an abandoned Dutch high school in the Netherlands. Like there's like no lights on. And he's there with like the creepy webcam, like in the dark classroom. That was very weird as well. And working on an island in Mexico during hurricane season when the power was coming and going, that was very strange. It's a deep well of memories that you're tapping into.
So weird follow-up question is the power issue, right? Because if you're a digital nomad, digital pretty much says that you have access to internet and some sort of power continuously. I know from traveling when I was in Mexico and South America and Puerto Rico and even some parts of the scattered West here in our country, it's really hard. So how do you have to pre-plan a lot of, okay, I'm going to have to go here and work and then I can be out of communicate for a week while I travel? Or how do you plan around those two things that aren't as readily accessible everywhere else that you may go?
You need to verify that where you're going has fast Wi-Fi, and you need to ask the host for the Wi-Fi speed because it's not a given that the Wi-Fi speed is workable everywhere. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the bare minimum step, but you really just have to learn to operate ahead of schedule. So my motto, and I say this a lot in my book, the due date is late. Like you cannot plan on submitting work to a client on the day it's due. It's not a good practice for anyone who has kids. You think you wake up and your kid's like spewing, and they're sick and you have to that's just not. It's almost not workable for like most people who live in any sort of uncertainty, within any level of uncertainty, but especially traveling. Like you don't know if the power is going to go out. You don't know what's going to happen, if there's going to be a hurricane coming through, or if something like normal happens that you just don't know about. Like in South Africa, they have something called load shedding, where they turn the power off for part of every day to distribute electricity more evenly. And sometimes it doesn't turn back on when they say it's going to turn back on. And one of my close friends is South African, so I've heard many complaints about it. But if you just like fly in and you're like, well, this looked beautiful on Instagram, so here I am, you do not know what you're in for. So you need to be at least 2 days ahead of schedule for everything. That's bare minimum. And plan your work, like have long work days whenever you have work days. Like whenever your Wi-Fi is good and you have a good workstation, you're in like a good vibe, like good zone, do as much work as possible. And then whenever you're off, be off. Don't try to like squeeze in an hour in the evening. That's whenever it all kind of bleeds together and you lose all balance.
That's what I was getting ready to ask you with being a nomad. I know it's really easy because my office is like 2 blocks from my house and it's easy to lose that work life back and forth on there. When you're doing this, do you have to set yourself certain hours? Are you working like doing full-time work, but being able to figure out how to do that part-time hours? Like how do you balance all this while you travel and do your nomadness, if that's a word?
I like that word. No madness. It's extremely hard for everyone. I've not met a single person who had an easy time finding balance. And if you try the digital nomad lifestyle and it's really hard for you and you think, man, I'm not cut out for it. No, you're one of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I interviewed digital nomads spanning 5 decades in my book. No one like found an easy path to this. But for me, I motivate myself. I work full-time hours still most days, and I motivate myself by doing something nice after work. So you need to be motivated to close your computer. And it might sound ridiculous if you're like in Croatia now, you think, well, why wouldn't you be motivated? And it's because we really care about our businesses. Like we all are so passionate about our businesses that it's easy to overwork. It's like maybe the default for a lot of us to overwork. And you need to be inspired. You need to make plans. You need to know that there's like live music at 8 and you're going to be there. And that really, you need to really be drawn out of your like world, your small bubble. You need to be drawn out every day by something. And even if you're not going out and like partying or, making friends, maybe you're, that's not your style. Just knowing like you're watching a new show on Netflix, you're reading a really good book. There's something really good for dinner. You just have to condition yourself to look forward to that and look forward to putting work away. I think that's the only way to find balance as a digital nomad.
I think that's a good tip for non-nomad people, is because I struggle with that. I think anybody that has a business company, whatever, they really struggle with that. But kind of moving on to the next question is how many languages do you know? So how are you transversing all these places with all these different languages?
Well, Ryan, we're all fluent in Google Translate. So
Fair. Thank you.
No, that's please don't make me admit how poor my language skills are. I'm fluent in English. No, okay, I can't say that even as a joke. I speak some Dutch because I lived in the Netherlands that was my home base for 5 years. And I had to actually integrate it and became like a Dutch citizen. So I had to pass 6 exams and they were all in Dutch. 4 of them were about Dutch language. So I passed all of those the first time, but don't ask me anything complicated in Dutch. I have traveler Spanish, ordering food, getting bus tickets, getting directions, basics. I studied French for 4 years, but that is very dusty. That takes me like 5 minutes to remember what I want to. It takes a lot of planning to use that. And traveling whenever we enter new countries, like we arrived in Croatia 2 weeks ago, and for us, it's really about basics, like please, thank you, smiling a lot and becoming kind of like expressive. Like you want to know how much something costs and you're like pointing and you're like, and it sounds ridiculous, but you can get really far with that. And people are really nice whenever they can tell that you're struggling to communicate. I find that people are extremely, they go out of their way and they'll even make sure, they like really want to make sure that they understand you. And that is like so nice. I can't tell you how nice it is to see someone. Like if you next time you bump into someone that's not a native speaker of your language, like think about how hard, we can all use a little more patience in those moments.
It's like a spontaneous game of charades is what it really is. Because when I traveled, same thing, like rudimentary Spanish, I can get around or whatever. But at a certain point, you're having to communicate more. And it really does break out into a spontaneous charades. Like, no, I need to go up that. And you're both trying to figure it out. It's and I don't know why. And for anybody out there that's non-native, when you're speaking to somebody that's non-native, speaking louder doesn't help. I don't know why people do that, because I noticed that if you're having trouble understanding for some reason, they feel if they say it louder, it'll be better.
Yeah.
That doesn't help.
And then changing your inflection. Oh yeah. Yes. Whenever it's like, you're like, oh, where's the bus station? And you're there like down the road and you don't understand. And they're like down the road. And it's like, that makes it more confusing because inflection is actually kind of universal. Not like totally, like I don't know about the whole world, but in a lot of like in Europe, and Latin America and the US, like inflection tells you a lot. And then it gets really weird because people start like stretching their syllables out and you're like, even if I spoke your language, I don't think I would understand what you're saying.
Yeah, because you got to understand there's some people in there that aren't good at their language, just like we have people that aren't good at our native language. And you might have
Yeah.
just won the unlucky lottery and got that person too.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's,
Or
you've got to do that.
dialects as
Yes.
well. And we were in the Yucatan in Mexico, and my husband speaks much better. He actually speaks Spanish.
Yeah.
And he was really struggling, and he was feeling so down about it. And then we had a taxi driver who said, well, I don't like it here because they only speak half Spanish and half Mayan. We were like, what? Are you kidding me? That's why. It's been so difficult. He's like asking to, basic sentences, and then he's like not understanding the response.
Yeah.
And, a lot of it comes down, like it is a bit scary to go where you don't speak the language, but you Google Translate. Most languages, I actually have traveled places where the language isn't even on Google Translate, and that's like, good luck. But I've done doctor's appointments. I went to the hospital once by myself and did a whole appointment with the doctors through Google Translate. You'd be shocked. At that point, you're like, done is done. Checked the box, survived. It was a success.
With that language barrier, sometimes is it hard to explain what you do for a living? I know that probably doesn't come up a lot, but is it kind of hard to explain? I write content for the internet. Like,
writer is actually a term that most people accept.
Gotcha.
It's easier in a way. It's not quite like nurse or teacher. Like that's my sister and my parents are nurse. And I'm always jealous of them. Like they tell people that they're a teacher and nurses, and everyone's like, good for you. And I just say writer, and people are normally like, that's nice. Oh, do you make money? But that's fine. I'm actually fine with those questions. Yes, I make money at my job, just like you do.
And that brings a very good point. I didn't mean to be dismissive of your book that you wrote, because we're going to talk about that
it's
in a minute.
fine. No, it's totally fine. It's very weird. Content, like what is content marketing? I wouldn't even go there with people.
That was what I was
Don't do it.
Like I explain to people, like, what do you do for a living? Like we produce podcasts for a living. That's all we do. And it's like, I just help people babble into a microphone. That's what I do. That's my job, badly explained. So tell us a little bit about the book, your process of writing the book. You said that you interviewed 50 years of digital nomads.
5 decades. Yeah, going back to the 80s. Digital nomadism is not as new as everybody thinks.
So how does that work in the 80s? Because I was there, I remember it, but I also remember it being really bad too. So how does digital nomadism work in 1980?
It started with a guy named Stephen Roberts, and Stephen is a very cool guy. I interviewed him for my book, and he shared so many stories with me. He was a technology writer, and he was really into computers. And if you were into computers in the early 80s, you were like super high tech. But then they came out with like, and he you built it yourself, but then they came out with the first like really portable computer in 83. And he thought, well, if I can work from home, I can work from anywhere. So he got on a bike and lived on a bicycle and biked around the US for 10 years, I believe. And he lived in a tent with his tiny Radio Shack 1000 computer. And to send his articles, he was also he was a technology writer. He would hook his computer up to a payphone with something called an acoustic coupler. And it was like suction cups that went on both ends of the payphone. And it like sent his article, I think, to a fax machine. But those details, I didn't get into those level of details with him. I couldn't remember it. It's all kind of foreign to me. I think of early tech and I hear dial up. Like the dial up sound is like permanently, like I'll be hearing that until I die. Like at 100, it would still be like playing, and it makes me happy to hear it. I'm like, oh yes, the internet. Like you're like waiting for the internet to warm up.
But no, I have one of those acoustic couplers somewhere. I don't think you
do
can see
you?
it.
You do not.
Yeah.
No one has even known what that was. You're the first person. I didn't know. I had to Google it. That's amazing.
I'm a technology nerd, and I love little hops in technology that were only around for very short periods of time because they were ineffective or ineffectual or whatever. So we didn't have them for very long. Like the 6-inch floppy disks, like the giant floppy disks, and then went to the 3.5. And then there's different monitors and different computers and different things just throughout time that were a hop to the next technological level, but just really weren't that well known or around for very long. It might be in my other studio, but I do have one. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
they freaked people out. Steven
yeah,
said that people would call the cops on him, and they like he's like hacking the phones, and like I made the joke. I don't know. He didn't make. I'm like, did they think you were a communist? Like, please tell me. Like 80s,
yes,
someone hooked up to the computer, and most people hadn't even seen a computer, so he was
right.
like quite the show. He had like a computer on his bike, and it was solar paneled, and I mean, that's a sight to behold. So I can understand the shock, but not enough shock to call the police.
So tell me about your little bit about your journey of writing the book, and how long did that take? And are there more books coming? Was this your first one?
This was my first book, and I would like to write more. I've already pitched my second book and had it shot down, so we'll see. It was about blogging, one of my great loves. But traveling,
Yes.
that's the first. So I was sharing little tidbits on LinkedIn and Instagram about the digital nomad lifestyle, because there's a lot of confusion. A lot of people think you're like living on vacation, and so I thought, let me like bring some realism into this. That was my approach. And a publisher found it, and they reached out to me and said, we want a book on this topic. We read your blog. Would you write it? So they pitched me, and I was really shocked, and I felt really nervous about it because I wanted to do the subject justice. It's like having such a moment as well. Like, this is like a small window since the pandemic, like digital nomadism is decades old, but it's having a big renaissance moment. And I didn't know if I could do it justice, but I think the book is really, I think it is something that people really enjoy. It's gotten really, really good feedback so far from everybody. And it's just a how-to guide on how to live this lifestyle filled with stories. So it's like a how-to guide, but it has like kind of the cadence of a travel memoir with stories from my experience, but also all these other people. And I like you said, technological hops. I covered all of those. I found people who were there for those moments, like the Stephen, and then I found someone from the 90s who they drove around in their RV with 4 kids and a wife and had a computer in the RV, and they would go up to people's homes and ask to use their dial-up internet. And they would like pull cord out of the house and put it through the window of the RV and plug the computer in. And it's a ridiculous image, but that was Rob Palmer. And now his kids grew up as digital nomads. And then one of his sons has a daughter, and she is growing up as the second generation of digital nomad kids. It is just, I don't know, to me, it's like really special. So the book is like a love letter to that. And I'm trying to tell these stories of the big technological jumps and also where's it going, because it's not slowing down. It's not a phase. Maybe remote work. There were more full-time remote workers in 2022 than there are in 2023. So that has tapered a little bit, but as a movement, it's not going anywhere. And I'm sorry, you started with how long did it take to write the book, and I ran away with it, but it took 6 months.
No, you're good.
Of writing.
Man, I write a Post-it note and I'm done. So I applaud you for, I'm like halfway through the list on the Post-it note. I'm like, I'll just text it. Like I'm just like, no. And then that's even wrong. So when's this book come out? Is it already out? Give us those details.
January 2023 or 2024. Gosh, for anyone who's listening in the future, but yeah, it comes out in January. Yes. And we've had people reading it in the industry, and gosh, that's a scary thing to send your writing to somebody in the industry and ask them for their feedback. But it's all been very positive so far. So I'm excited. I'm still scared, of course. I mean, you can't edit it. That's never happened before.
Well, if you'll have to come back later, like in a few months or a little bit, and tell me how that went after it got released and what that looks like for the next one. One last question before we start wrapping up here is, you'd made the comment that it's a movement that's seeing a renaissance. So is work from home. And you see the big backlash from corporations trying to make people come back from COVID and come back into the office. Now, I have an office because I will take gummies and play video games all day if I'm left to my own devices. So I have to come here to do this because I'm a giant man child. Now, I also take my days where I take my computer at home and I never leave my house. I won't leave my house for 3 or 4 days because I don't have to do the podcast thing and I can do everything from the background. In your just editorialize, why is big corporations so against this remote work? If the output is the same, if the product is the same, then why are they so, you have to come to the office and be miserable in these four walls versus go out and be happy and do a good job?
I think that it just shows that employment is about control much more than employers would ever have admitted that before. Like, I think they really showed their cards with this reaction to work from home, that, we don't care if it takes you half as, because that's the thing. The argument is like, well, they might be only working half the day and we'll never know. But that means that their work is being met. They're doing their outputs. Workers are meeting the requirements for 40 hours a week in 20, and they don't even care that they're wasting that money. They just don't want you to have that freedom. That's my interpretation. I don't go into that in the book because I think a lot of people are happy as employed. And if you are happy and you're employed, it's so good. But I think that a lot more people are unhappy. Like, it's kind of, I think, the relationship between the corporate world and its employees, it went through some stuff with COVID. It's almost like after an affair, and it's like things are normal, but it's really not normal because you're still holding a grudge. I think people are still feeling that way. They're feeling cheated. And I think maybe they should feel cheated.
It's a pretty big can of worms to open, because I feel the same way. Because as someone that has to manage remote employees, there are definitely challenges. And you absolutely know that they're not committed to you 40 hours a week. So you have to manage by output, not time.
Yeah.
You have to be like, here are your markers for the week. I expect you to hit those because I feel that's reasonable in you hitting those. It's not about filling their time. It's not about keeping them busy. It's about getting the same amount of output. And if I think in the real world, when we had to go to offices, if you are a high value employee, you just got more work gathered on your desk. Then the low value employee got to skate off without doing it. It's kind of a normalizer, because if I hire 5 people, I give all 5 the same task and 3 come through with it. I don't shift. I fire the 2 and I hire 2 different ones that will work within the confines of what I want them to. I can't have as much leeway as I would in an office because I don't get to oversee them as much. But on the other side of it, I found through that cycle, I have found people that I don't have to worry about, that I can literally on Monday post job requirements for the week, talk to them when they need to, job requirements are done, and we're all happy.
Yeah. See, that's the positive side. I think that the office removed a lot of going online. It removed a lot of artifice. And I think it's remiss to, you can't just ignore the fact that a lot of people benefited from that artifice. Like, we all have worked with people who dressed really well, and let's say we're attractive, and they talked the talk and really, always making jokes and schmoozing, but their output was low, but they were seen as high value. And a lot of it was based on artificial, reputation builders, like how they looked and how well liked they were. And I do like that so much of that is removed. You get really down to the down, dirty, honest part of the work with remote work. And I think that the corporate world isn't ready to remove that artifice, because so many people have benefited from that, who've climbed the ranks. They like that. And I think that a lot of managers, perhaps totally reaching here, but maybe they are afraid to be judged by output. Maybe it's impossible to do their job well. Maybe, we're not giving enough credit. Maybe some people cannot do their job well remotely, and they're afraid, and they don't want their team to be remote. I really don't know. It's quite complicated. I wouldn't say that everyone should be remote. But I think if you want to, you should, because it's so great if you get to spend your time more freely. But it's not for everyone. Nothing is for everyone.
No, and we ran hybrid for a while over on the digital marketing side, and that just culled a bunch of people out because they'd either stop coming to work or it was bad. And I think it was a resettling. And I think that employers and employees should friendly come back to the negotiating table and figure out this work and work from home and remote and expectation things. Because with Gen Z coming up, they don't put up with the things that we used to, and they don't have the same values and views as we did. As I'm a Gen X and you're a millennial, and just as it goes down, it just there's going to be less and less, and there's not a work shortage, there's a work for jerk shortage, and and that's going to have to be rectified if we want to fix this.
Yeah, yeah, you nailed it. And I think the gig economy is really, I mean, statistics, I think if we look at the statistics, it's very clear. Like more people are going to be self-employed, and self-employed people make more money once
Of course.
after a few years of doing their craft. Like as I know I mean, there's a lot of benefits. And I
Yeah.
think that the corporate workforce is not prepared to counter those benefits with more benefits. Like they don't want to come to the table because they don't want to offer more.
Right. And that's the big corporations get into the let me see how much money I can make out of somebody instead of
Hmm.
having that balance. And I think that's another reason they're losing it. And then when you're self-employed, you take on a lot of the work, but I found that the rewards are way better. The rewards are if you have a happy workforce that feel like they're contributing and they feel like they can make it and there's a path to even more success. Even if I take a hit on what I have on my bottom line, it makes the whole process run smoother, and then we all elevate together instead of just one guy at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the future. I mean,
Yeah,
it has to be. People are done with it the way it is.
they really are. All right, so we've gotten way off in left field here, which is fine, which is all my fault, which is what this show does, which is fine. But Kayla Ihrig from writingfromnowhere.com, let us know where we can find your book, where we can find you outside of here, and how to reach out if we have questions or comments.
If you want to reach out, you can send me an email at kayla@writingfromnowhere.com. I love reading emails from anyone who's interested in chatting. And you can find my book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, all those websites. And maybe you can drop the link in the show notes so that people can find it there. And yeah, I would love to connect with anyone. And on social as well, on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn if anyone wants to come connect and say hi. Tell me that you came from the podcast, though, because I don't can accept requests from people without a message attached.
Fair enough. I think I sent you one this morning. So,
Oh, nice. Oh, I
yeah.
might have rejected it out of just quick. No, I didn't. I would have recognized your name. I get a lot of requests on LinkedIn.
I would.
No,
I
I
would
get a
reject me.
lot in a day. It's a lot of spam, a lot of hey babe, It's kind of gross.
Every now and then I have a piece of content go viral, or I'm on another show, I guest a lot or whatever. And I'll get 1,000 friend requests on Facebook or whatever in like a week. Well, I made the mistake of just select yes, all, whatever.
Oh no.
And then my wife and I we newly married. We got married in June, and we have each other's passwords, and we're sitting in bed playing on the phone. And I open up my stories, and it's all just, you know what it is.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, and she's like, babe, you got some splaining to do. And I'm like, I just accepted 1,000 friend requests, and apparently they're all OnlyFans. So that's.
And then you get the gross side whenever the female side of that is like, do you want to be my sugar baby? I've gotten those messages. And do you want to be my third wife? I don't even know if people are kidding, It's
right.
like, no, I do not. So yeah, I'm quite picky about who I connect with on LinkedIn.
Yeah, my wife gets those messages all the time too. So we compare like how bad it is out there on some of those. All right. Well, before we go down another rabbit hole, this is Small Business Chronicles. You can catch us on smallbusinessdelivered.com. You can also catch captivating shows like Marketing Masters, the Agency Power Show hosted by Cash Miller, and Business Breakthroughs by Neil DiPentino. Neil DiPentino worked with Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. He kind of knows what he's talking about. He talks to business coaches, and we talk about all that. Also, if you want a podcast like this one, only better, you can find us at titanmediaworks.com. That's what we do. We produce podcasts. We take all the work out of it. It's a done for you, out of the box. You show up, do the fun part. We do all the heavy lifting after that. So titanmediaworks.com. Until next time, everybody. Thank you again, Kayla.